Good day, night, evening, whatever time may be, ladies and gentlemen. This is Darth Chain. Hopefully, you guys are having a good one. Today, we're going to be bringing you a lore video about the 6 human gods inside Guild Wars 2. Now, there's going to be 2 other gods. We also talk about a third maybe god that we will touch on very briefly. But we are essentially going to go somewhat in order, not entirely, but the human gods resided in the mists and eventually brought humanity to Tyria. Now, some of the gods wanted the creatures of Tyria to live in peaceful cohabitation with the humans, like the Chars, the Centaurs, and the humans living together, and others wanted complete and total dominance. So the gods that came to Tyria and first made their home on Or were Balthazar, the god of war, Duena, the goddess of healing, who is also considered the leader of the pantheon of the gods, Melandru, the goddess of nature, Lissa, the twin goddesses of beauty, and Doom, the old god of death, and Abaddon, the old god of knowledge. Now, we'll be getting into the last two later on as we go through. But we will start off with Duena. Now, like I said, Duena is considered the head of the pantheon, and she is the high goddess of healing, air, warmth, and light. So in the old days, wind-praying dervishes, air elementalists, healing prayer monks, and leadership paragons would search for the blessings of Duena. Now, for my Guild Wars 2 people, dervishes, monks, and paragons are no longer in the game. Paragons and monks kind of got melded into the single class that we now know as Guardians, and dervishes have essentially just been taken right out of the game, with very few aspects of them still remaining. Duena was the first god to step onto Tyria from the mist, and the one to bring the humans with her as well. Duena wanted to bring the humans to Tyria in hopes of making a utopia. When Duena gives her blessings to different people, it is usually to healers who offer their services to both the poor and the rich evenly. According to history, it was Duena who asked Malchior the sculptor to make statues of the gods so humans could gaze upon them without being blinded. This was a common problem for the gods up until this point when they were being praised. If a human looked too long upon them, they would eventually go blind. Now, with Malchior being tasked with this job, he had to gaze upon the gods fairly often. And unfortunately, he did go blind after he had finished what he had set out to do. Shortly after the exodus of the gods, when the gods left Tyria, Malchior ended up taking his own life at where we now know as Malchior's Leap. Now, while Duena was on Tyria, she fell in love with a human man, and later she gave birth. Now, she gave birth to who we now know is Grenth. So even though we do know that she did have relations with a human, we do not know who the father is. Duena is usually depicted as a young, tall, and slender woman with wings, and is sometimes depicted as rising from the ground. So that is all we have on Duena, so let's go to the next god, Grenth. Now, Grenth is the current arbiter god of darkness, death, judgment, and ice. Grenth is usually worshipped by assassins, water elementalists, necromancers, and old ritualists. Now again, for my Guild Wars 2 people, assassins essentially became thieves, and ritualists have essentially been removed from the game as well, save for minor hints like the Guardian's spirit weapons. This is the closest combination I can think of. Now, as stated with Duena, Grenth is one of the few gods who is actually born on Tyria. The only other god like him is Cormyr, but again, we'll get into her later. Grenth would take over the position of the god of death by defeating Doom. And again, we'll get into him later. Grenth had to overthrow Doom to take his position, and when he did, he had the help of 7 humans who would become known as the 7 Reapers. When Grenth threw Doom behind the doors of the Hall of Judgment and took Doom's place, he made the 7 Reapers into his avatars that spoke on his behalf to the world of Tyria. Now, Grenth fought Doom inside the Hall of Judgment, inside the Underworld, which is located inside the Mists. When Brent and the Seven Reapers faced down Doom, they were able to again chain him up and lock him inside the Hall of Judgment. Sadly, they were not able to kill Doom, so his power slowly regained as more creatures died on Tyria. That's where he got his power from. So eventually Doom was able to overpower the Seven Reapers and able to break free from the Hall of Judgment and entrap the Seven Reapers in different areas of the underworld. So during the actions of Guild Wars 1, Grant actually asked more humans to travel to the underworld to help him re-secure Doom and lock him behind the gates once more. Again, we were not able to kill him, but were able to subdue him for the time being. Now, Grant can be a strict god as he rules over death and judgment. The few times he would break his rules is if the world was in great danger. During the actions of Shiro Tagachi, the gods blessed the heroes along with Master Togo with the abilities to take down Shiro. Now, Grant appears to be human, but wears the skull of a fallen beast, and different regions will depict him with a different skull. Tyrians will depict him with that of an ox skull, while Canthans will depict him with more of a demonic skull. If Grant was to have another in the pantheon that he was always at ends with, it would be Lissa, the goddess of illusions. Lissa is the twin goddesses of beauty, water, energy, and illusions. Individually, they are the twins Ilya and Lys. She is usually worshipped by mesmers and assassins and has close ties to certain elementalists and more mystic dervishes. While ore was being cultivated and Ara rose on the island, Lys visited a small village close by named Ren. Lys disguised herself as a sickly young woman and asked the humans for shelter and work. All the villagers but one turned her away. The human was a woman named Sarah who gladly offered her help. When that happened, Lissa revealed herself while the people bowed to her as she blessed Sarah with her gifts. Lissa wanted to stay in Ren with her followers, but was eventually called back to Ara to join the pantheon of the gods. Now, Lissa is usually depicted as the two twins, usually encircling each other and with half a mask on each one of their faces to represent the two but one dichotomy they have. Now we will move on to Melandru. Melandru is the mother goddess of nature, earth, protection, and growth. Melandru is usually worshipped by earth dervishes, earth elementalists, and rangers. When the statues of the gods were put on the roadsides, these groups would usually tend to them and offer other travelers food, water, and a place to rest. According to legend, she was the third god to arrive on Tyria after Duenna and Balthazar, and of all the other gods, she worked with Duenna the most in an attempt to bring peace to all the races of Tyria. She was also the one who terraformed Ore into a green flowering expanse for humans to live on. From what we know, the island stayed a great flowering expanse up until the sinking of Ore during one of the Great Guild Wars. Now, Melandru had devout followers who were known as Druids. They would go deep into the Meguma jungle and they would live off the land. Some people wondered what happened to the group when the Druids slowly stopped coming from the jungle. Some thought other humans had killed them, while others thought that the jungle's dangers would. In truth, the Druids were able to shed their bodies and become spirits inside the jungle. They would take the look of oak hearts, and this was done to become closer to their goddess. For the humans that lived in Kantha, they loved the Ekavald Forest and the Jade Sea. When Shiro Tagachi was slain by the Luxon champion Archimoris and the Kurzik champion Saint Victor, he released a powerful spell that turned the Ekavald Forest into stone and the Jade Sea into literal jade. This was known as the Jade Wind. Many Canthans believe that Melandru died with this wind. Others believe she yet still lives, trapped within the sea herself. Others know that she had left with the pantheon of the gods during the exodus of the gods. Now, Melandru's statues are still worshipped throughout Tyria, but by a race other than humans. The Quaggans have found some of the statues submerged underwater and refer to her as Malagan. They believe that Malagan has been killed by the Crate. other historians have tried to point out that the statues they pray to is the goddess Melandru. The Quaggins would disagree, but they are just simply too polite to do so. So now we're going to move on to the newest of the gods, Cormyr. Cormyr is the newborn goddess of order, spirit, knowledge, and truth. Cormyr was once a human paragon that was a spear marshal. That means she was a high-ranking military officer on the island of Istan in the continent of Valona. Now, Cormyr had uncovered a lost city on the island only to find out that an ancient demon had been awakened. Cormyr and her sun spears were able to defeat it, but only to find out that the war marshal of Korna, Varish Osa, was working to raise a forgotten god back to power. The sun spears worked their best they could to unite Alona against Varish until they ultimately confronted her at a portal leading to the realm of torment. Varish attacked with the blessings of the ancient god and had become a Margonite, one of its champions. Cormyr and her sun spears were able to defeat Varish and then rush to the portal to confront the dead god, or the old god, in his own territory. Now, while they were running through the realm of torment, they were besieged by the avatars of the other 5 gods, and were bestowed with the powers to eventually kill the old god. Now, Cormyr and her sun spears rushed through the realm only to come face to face with the fallen god Abaddon, who had been locked away by the other 5 gods before the exodus of the gods. Their battle was fierce, and eventually they were able to kill him. The power from Abaddon started to break the realm of torment apart, and Cormyr sacrificed herself to absorb the power. Little did she know this would make her the new god of spirit and knowledge and all of that grand old stuff. Not much is known about Cormyr after her ascension to godhood, as with the awakening of the dragons of Tyria, the connection between the gods and Tyria was severely damaged. Now we will move on to Balthazar. He is the heroic god of war, fire, strength, and courage, and the last of the 6 gods we will cover. Balthazar is worshipped by warriors, fire elementalists, smiting monks, and some paragons. He was the second god to walk onto Tyria when arriving, he was carrying the head of his father and leading his warhounds, Temer and Tegon. He bathed the island of Or in a cleansing fire and wished for humanity to dominate this world. He believed that the humans would have no trouble defeating the other races on the planet, and because of his tendencies of battle, some would refer to him as the god of mass murder. There was an old human guild called the Zaishan Order that held tournaments to honor and protected Balthazar's holy sites. They would hold tournaments in his name, while others would pray to Balthazar for glory in said battles. Now, while Lyssa are twins and Grant and Cormyr were born on Tyria, Balthazar is also known to have family. He has a half-brother named Menzies. Now, while Menzies is not known to have the longevity of his brother, he is known to have an army. Menzies is known as the Lord of Destruction. He commands the Shadow Army and is always on a move to take the Fisher of Woe from his brother Balthazar. They have warred on these grounds as Menzies wanted his brother's position, and it is not known if Menzies ever completed his task or if he is even still alive. We did just get Menzies' great sword inside of Guild Wars 2, but so far that is the only reference that we have of him in Guild Wars 2 as far as I could find. So now that we are done with the main pantheon of the gods, we're going to go into the 2 dead gods, and then we will wrap this video up. Menzies was kind of the outlier here because we really don't know too much about him. So to start us off, we will go with the old god of death, Doom. As stated with Grant, Doom ruled from the underworld, an area where most of the dead go into the mists when they first go. From there, they are then judged by Doom, or now Grant, and then sent to where they are supposed to go based on their actions in life. Now, Doom was a very strict god that did not tolerate any undead or any resurrections. If any would escape from his realm, he would track them down and bring them back to the mists. Doom was later challenged and defeated by Grenth and the Seven Reapers in the Underworld. Where Grenth won, he destroyed Doom's tower and locked him within the Hall of Judgment. Behind the door, Doom bided his time, for whenever anything died on Tyria, he gained a little bit of his power. Slowly, he would regain his power and eventually lash out at Grenth and trap the Seven Reapers within the realm of torment. Doom's minions would also be helped by Menzies and vice versa. While we've seen some of Menzies' forces inside the Underworld, we also found some of the Underworld forces inside the Fissure of Woe, and they both helped each other to try and take back power from the others. We would also see some of Menzies' allies inside the Realm of Torment helping Abaddon, which we'll get to next. Years later, Grenth would recruit other humans to travel to the Underworld. There, they would be tasked to free Grenth's Seven Reapers and face Doom once again. While they didn't have the power to kill the god of old, they were still strong enough to reseal him back within the hall, where he would sit and bide his time yet again. So, now we will move on to the last god, Abaddon, the dead god of knowledge. Now, Abaddon, as a god, is shrouded in mystery. It is known that he had deposed another god to take his place. He was then worshipped by a seafaring nation of humans called the Marganites. Abaddon is the god who spread magic to all races of Tyria. This led to the forming of human guilds and them going to war with each other in multiple guild wars. After the first major guild war, King Dork came to the gods and asked for their help. The gods created the Bloodstone, a giant rock that was sealed with Dork's blood. They used this to dilute the gift of magic onto the world. The Bloodstone was then broken into 5 sections, 4 sections, each representing the main philosophies of magic, and then a 5th that was used as a keystone. They were then placed inside the volcano Abaddon's mouth, and when the volcano erupted, the stones were scattered over Tyria. Now, Abaddon was enraged by the other gods' deal with Dork that he went so far as to war against the other gods. Being outnumbered, Abaddon was struck down in the Crystal Sea, which after the battle was turned into the Crystal Desert. Abaddon was then sealed away inside the Realm of Torment, while Balthazar built the chains that bound him. Shortly after Abaddon's interment in the Realm of Torment, the gods left Tyria in the Exodus of the Gods. This does not stop Abaddon, as he would send his Marganite minions out into the world to try and bring his power back. This is where Shiro Tagachi fell from the graces of the Emperor's personal bodyguard to his own decapitator. From there, the Jade Wind would send out and destroy the Ekavald force in the Jade Sea. Abaddon would also send out the Titans, who the Char believed were their gods, and would destroy the human kingdom of Ascalon. The Char would eventually lash back and destroy the Titans, pushing them back into the foundry of failed creation. It was also the Char that attacked the island of Or. Vizier Kilborn read from the Lost Scrolls, which caused Or to sink into the bottom of the ocean in what would be called the Third Guild War. Years later, Abaddon was close to being resurrected by Varish Osa. Then Spear Marshal Cormier led an attack and opened the gates to Abaddon's realm. There, the Sun Spears rushed to Abaddon's doorstep. Here, Cormier was gifted by the 5 gods and eventually took Abaddon's place. So that is the recap of all of the gods inside Guild Wars 2. This is a very long video, holy crap. Just a couple more things I wanted to bring with you guys. The gods actually showed up on the planet after the Elder Dragons. So I actually have 2 questions that some people asked me. I offered a little question section for people. One person asked, explain the connection of the gods. There really isn't much of a connection besides Balthazar to Menzies and Dwayne to Grenth, and obviously Ilya and Lys. Other than that, they're just magical beings as far as I could find. I may be wrong. Another one is, what are the connections between the gods and the dragons? Now again, I really did not find one. It seems to just be that we have a dragon like Mordramoth, and then we have the goddess Melandria, both being plants, being nature and all that stuff. And then we have Primordus and Balthazar. So again, there really isn't much of a connection between the gods and the dragons. The gods came to Tyria over 2,000 years ago in lore, because the Exodus happens at the 0 year, so there was time before the 0 year that counted down, and then it counted up, kind of like AC and BCE and ACE, I believe is how it is nowadays. While the dragons have been asleep for over 11,000 years. Now, I do think there is a little bit of a connection between Abaddon and the dragons. Abaddon brought a lot of magic to the world, so the dragons have more to feast on, so they may be awakening quicker than other times in the world's history. So I do hope you guys enjoyed this little lore video. It's a long one, so hope you guys bared through it and actually liked what I had to offer. Other than that, I will see you guys in the next video. Do take care, and we'll see you later. Bye.